Bear with me for just a moment while I channel the ghost of Jim Morrison. Fauci's got the coof. Fauci's got the coof. He acted so aloof. Said he had the proof that we all would come to harm without a needle in our arm. Fauci's got the coof. I could have done the whole song, but I stopped there. So, as you most assuredly have heard by now, Dr. Anthony Fauci, America's top infectious disease expert, longest tenured federal bureaucrat, in addition to being its most well-intentioned public servant, a man so humble and modest he displays Anthony Fauci prayer candles in his office, recipient of every Kung Flu vaccine and booster shot known to medical science, is currently in quarantine with, you guessed it, the Kung Flu. And there's this weird thing that happens now each time some government official or idiot celebrity comes down with the COVID, where they immediately start chanting this quasi-religious sounding mantra of, I feel so fortunate to have been vaxxed and boosted, and I encourage everyone else to get vaxxed and boosted too, because heaven forbid, perish the thought, that any of our self-appointed overlords might muster the candor, nay, the moral courage to say a thing everybody knows is true. The stupid vaccines did not work as advertised, nor anything close to it. Furthermore, there was no demonstrable benefit that we gained as a society by letting the public health maniac social engineers run amok for 2 years. We gained nothing by shutting the schools down, we gained nothing by wearing the ridiculous face diaper obedience muzzles, and we gained less than nothing. In fact, we lost a whole hell of a lot by shuttering most of the economy and paying people to stay home with fictional money we printed up just for the occasion, which in turn unleashed the wrecking ball of inflation on an economy that had nothing fundamentally wrong with it, except that it had been artificially constrained by dumb government policy. Literally, all we had to do was just tell everybody to go back to work, correct the mistake, tell people the truth. Sorry, looks like we overreacted, the thing's not as bad as we thought it was. So, false alarm. Go back about your lives. There still would have been some pain economically, since we have an administration that kneecapped our domestic energy production and then threw open the border for 3.5 million illegal aliens that we know about. There's no telling how big the actual number is, but here's the problem with admitting you were wrong and backing off on the crazy mandates. That doesn't help Tony Fauci maintain his career as a media superstar. The only way Tony Fauci gets to be on TV 27 hours a day is if the mandates remain in force for months and years on end, and everybody is hanging on Tony Fauci's every word, wondering when it all might be over. So talk about a perverse incentive for Tony Fauci. The worse he did his job, the more he got to be on television, which is the only thing he cares about anyway. But even a man as self-deluded as Fauci must understand that the good times are coming to an end. Because what do you suppose the chances are that this guy's going to stick around long enough for a Republican Congress to start investigating all the widely variegated forms of misconduct and malfeasance in which he has engaged? Not just with regard to the botched response to the virus, but also his very cozy and cordial relationship with the Chinese Communist Party, going all the way back to when he was instrumental in providing the special WHO dispensation that allowed China to build the Wuhan Institute of Virology in the first place. And Fauci won't be the only one scurrying out of Dodge between now and November. Not by a long shot. I actually think we're about to see a cavalcade of rats abandoning this sinking ship that will make your head spin. And I want to talk about that in the main segment. Jim Eagle, hit the damn music. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where the only thing bigger than the size of your dreams is the pile of enemy dead in front of our gates, good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. Happy Friday. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And speaking of people who are likely not long for the White House, it's been a while since we've checked in with White House Press Secretary Baghdad Buckwheat, who is just about as bad at this job as a person can be at a thing, if I'm being charitable. We were told she was an inspirational figure, a breaker of glass ceilings, if you will. We were told the country would be a manifestly better place in which to live from now on by virtue of the fact that the White House press secretary is now a black, gay, immigrant lesbian of color. Those are lofty words indeed, aspirational words, you might say, but in terms of the ground-level reality, watching Karine Jean-Pierre run a press briefing is rather like watching me try to do an Olympic figure skating routine, because there is no mistaking the fact right from the outset, right from the first glance, that you are watching a person who possesses none of the most basic skills that this activity requires. You're watching a person who is out of their depth to the point where it's difficult to look at because it's so damned embarrassing. To be an Olympic figure skater, the most basic skill is you have to be able to balance on your skate blades without falling over. And if you can't manage that, then you need to find a new dream job. As a press secretary, the most basic skill is that you have to be able to sometimes speak extemporaneously without making a complete blithering ass of yourself. You can't read every response from a sheet of paper. You need to be sufficiently acquainted with the day's news and with the policy positions of the administration for which you work to engage in a bit of back and forth with the press corps. But with Baghdad Buckwheat, man, it is rough to watch. And it's not getting better. And I'll tell you what her vibe is like. Each time she's asked a question, even the softball questions from the friendly reporters, she gets this deer-in-the-headlights look, like that was the absolute last question she was ever expecting someone to ask. And then, in the finest tradition of the kid in high school who never did their homework but had a different excuse every day, she starts slowly flipping through her binder. Not because she thinks she's going to find the answer there, but because she has no idea what to say, and she hopes that if she stands there flipping binder pages long enough, then the perfect answer will somehow magically present itself. But in the event, all we get is her looking down at the binder, sort of breathing uneasily, trying to think of random words to say in the finest tradition of Vice President Kamala Harris. I think the two of them actually share a pathological fear of silence to the point where they will blurt out just about anything in order to avoid it. And look, I could understand her being flummoxed or caught off guard if it was some weird question that was totally out of left field, but she does this act for even the most basic questions that she ought to be the most well prepared for. For example, in a country where shortages of baby formula are a thing, and that's us now, apparently, because isn't that fun? It's reasonable to expect that the White House press secretary should be well prepared to answer questions on the baby formula supply. But here's what we get. I don't know if I have anything new on that. It's been a couple days since anybody asked me about that, so there you go. I think I've filled up 15 seconds. We're good now, right? Your babies will just have to starve. Get the fuck over it. She knew there was nothing in that binder that was going to save her. And the shocking part is she's so bad at this job that she can't even think of a few reassuring platitudes to rattle off. So let's suppose you get that question. It catches you off guard. You're not prepared for it. Whatever. Here's all you need to say. The president continues to monitor the situation closely. He is deeply concerned about the fact that parents are having difficulty in locating baby formula, and the federal government is doing everything in its power to help solve this problem. Is it total bullshit? Of course it's total bullshit. But that is what press secretaries do. It's not that hard. This is not rocket surgery. It's not freaking 4D chess. Maybe we should actually change her name from Baghdad Buckwheat to Paige Turner. I almost feel like I am insulting the legend of the Iraqi information minister by having named her in his honor, because that guy was at least really good at spinning fanciful stories that scored super high on the comedy bullshit meter. And if you don't remember the Iraqi information minister, whose real name was Mohammed Saeed al-Sahaf, he was the guy back in 2003, even as Saddam's forces were being routed and the fall of Baghdad had well and truly begun, he stood up on top of that building every day, confidently asserting to the world press that we are defeating this dastardly infidel invasion. Even as missiles were striking government buildings in the background on camera, he never wavered in his belief in the ultimate Iraqi victory. In that way, he was rather like the 20 years ago version of the CNN reporter who stands in front of the burned-out city and casually remarks, well, these protests have been not unruly, generally speaking. Fiery, but mostly peaceful, I'd say. And just because I can't resist, and don't pretend you didn't know I would do this, let's revisit a few of Baghdad Bob's greatest hits. There are no American infidels in Baghdad. Never. We will slaughter them all. Our initial assessment is they will all die. I am not scared, and neither should you be. We will welcome them with bullets and shoes. Here's another good one. Faltering forces of infidels cannot enter a country of 26 million people and lay siege to them. They are the ones who will find themselves under siege. God will roast their stomachs in hell at the hands of Iraqis. So to reiterate, Ms. Jean-Pierre, I'm going to need to see a drastic improvement in your performance if you wish to continue carrying the moniker of Baghdad Buckwheat. Just as honorific titles are granted, so too can they be rescinded. And currently, you are doing a piss-poor job living up to the legacy of my good friend Mohammed Saeed al-Sahaf, a man we all hold in fond remembrance. May he rest in peace. Unless he's still alive. In which case, I hope he has a great weekend. But let's call things what they are. When your approval rating is already falling faster than Jeffrey Epstein's trousers at a Girl Scout jamboree, when even the friendly pollsters have you in the mid-30s with no bottom in sight because nobody likes you and you're the worst president in history, you cannot continue with a press secretary like this. I don't care how inspirational it is that she's a black, gay, lesbian immigrant of color. I mean, the new girl is actually so bad at this, all of a sudden I'm hearing people say that Lady Ginger McFirebush of Alabaster Farms was a good press secretary. No, she was not. She was really quite terrible, actually. The only skill she possessed that sets her apart from her successor is the one we already talked about. She knew how to string together platitudes and catchphrases that were in accordance with whatever today's policy positions were. She wasn't great at it, but at least she was never reduced all that often to desperately flipping pages until the teacher gets frustrated and decides to ask the next kid to turn their homework in. She's not going to be fired, obviously, because then the Twitter rage mob would say the administration committed a racist, homophobic, misogynist hate crime, but she will be compelled to resign. And I think we should expect that development sooner than later, because each one of these press briefings is just a fiery Back to the Future 3 style train wreck, and this is not an administration that can afford to let unforced errors pile up right now, because Joe Biden, whether he's noticed it or not, he is right on the verge of being thrown under the bus by his own party, and by his own friendly fake news media, the people that bent themselves into such absurd pretzel shapes trying to make sure he got installed in the presidency in the first place. There are a lot of people on the left, and their numbers seem to be growing daily, who want Biden to announce before the midterm that he's not going to run for re-election. And needless to say, neither Joe nor Kamala's phone is currently ringing off the hook with calls from vulnerable congressional Democrats saying, please come campaign with me, which stands to reason, because when you're a candidate who's interested in winning and your party's president and vice president are both less popular than genital warts, you would want to stay as far away from those two people as humanly possible. We have had some bad presidents before. We've had some really bad presidents before, but I don't think we've ever seen it happen, and it certainly hasn't in my lifetime, that a president becomes a pariah to his own party less than 18 months after his election and well before the midterm. As we know, it's normal for the president's party to lose seats in the midterm. In fact, it's probably the most consistent trend line in our entire political history. But I think we're seeing something fairly unprecedented here, or starting to, where the president has yet to complete 40% of his term in office, and lots of people in his own party are acting like it's time to cut bait and move on. At this point, the only Democrat office holder who's willing to say he wants a second term for Joe Biden is Chris Coons, the guy who occupies Biden's former Senate seat and basically came up as his apprentice and protege. But here's the confounding factor. Joe Biden doesn't seem to grasp any of this, and there are lots of things he doesn't grasp, like how those little shiny silver gramophone records are supposed to work, so that's not necessarily a surprise, but still. Though Joe Biden's state of mental cognition is somewhere between mashed potatoes and a half-deflated basketball, it would seem his powers of hubris and self-delusion remain perfectly intact, for it keeps being reported that he's been telling people he fully intends to run for re-election, based on his belief that he's the only guy who can defeat Donald Trump. And I don't know about you, but I want that delusion to remain 100% intact. Because talk about something we've never seen before in our political history. Whenever we've seen a sitting president wanting to run for re-election, but his party wanting to deny him the nomination. The only thing close to an analog to that in my lifetime is 1976, when Ford wound up with the nomination, even though half of the party, maybe more, wanted to give it to Reagan, but Ford was an accidental president, so that's where that comparison stops being useful. But if Biden insists not just on staying in office, but running for re-election and serving a second term that would end shortly before his 217th birthday, we probably are going to see the first palace coup in our history. We are going to see the exercise of the 25th Amendment, and that's going to be pretty fascinating. Especially if Joe winds up getting dragged out of the White House in chains and bundled off to an undisclosed nursing home somewhere. But in the realm of things we definitely will see an exodus of people from the administration. It's going to begin as just a trickle as we approach the midterm, and it will turn into a tsunami right after the election when all the cabinet secretaries who are likely to be investigated by a Republican Congress are going to make a beeline for the exits. So if it gets to be Christmas and Mayorkas is still running Homeland Security, I will personally dress up in drag, come over to your house, and read to your kids for an hour. Javier Becerra will be gone from HHS, the department that Joe Biden still calls Health, Education, and Welfare every single time, proving that his brain remains trapped in 1973, because let's face it, if Tony Fauci needs to get the hell out of Dodge to avoid being investigated, and he does, then so the hell, too, does Tony Fauci's boss. Mayor Pete, he'll be gone, obviously, since Mayor Pete persists in believing he has some sort of political future, even though the only reason you have ever heard of him, the only reason he was a presidential candidate, the only reason he is a cabinet secretary currently, is because he has sex with other dudes. But he's not going to want to hitch his wagon to this administration for very much longer. Jennifer Granholm will be gone from the Energy Department. She's got nothing to gain by sticking around. Her track record is indefensible. And she has probably got some cushy university president job waiting for her anyway, just as I'm sure Janet Yellen does, who will also be gone, and this will be a big loss for Biden, since Janet Yellen is the one person in the government who is even more clueless and senile than he is. Now, we've still got 5 months to go before this midterm happens, and as always, things will happen between now and then that no one could have foreseen, but barring some sort of cataclysmic supernatural event, the Republicans are going to gain a hell of a lot of seats, and the Democrats are going to lose a hell of a lot. But the magic number is 287. If the Republicans wind up with 287 in the House, that is a majority whereby you can override a presidential veto on a straight party line vote. It would take just about the worst midterm bloodbath in history to make it happen, but it is not outside the realm of possibility. Extreme times often produce extreme results. Should that happen, you'll have a president who is incapable of doing anything except trying to govern by executive decree, which he, of course, would try to do. Make no mistake about that. He'll be a lame duck with 2 years to go. Congressional Democrats will be unable to protect him from a hailstorm of investigations, and he'll try to go out in some glorious blaze of hubristic self-importance. Meanwhile, the Congress will be able to pass anything it wants, vetoes be damned, and that will make Joe even crankier. But for right now, there's not much left to do but to see how many rats try to make their escape from the Joe Biden Titanic and when they decide to make their move. We will leave it there for tonight and close out the week. Thank you very much for watching. Have a pleasant tomorrow and an edifying weekend. I will see you Monday. Until then, do not comply. Get off my lawn.